Hello, patrolmen and parking violations. My name is TB Sky, and following on from yesterday, we're going to be taking another look at one of the community collaboration comics. In this case, we're going to be looking at Punches and Plants, a Piltover Police story. Good lord, that's a lot of alliteration, by Risu. These comics are community collaboration comics, as it says indeed in the name, where Riot has commissioned artists, fan artists, who just League of Legends fans, to create comics in the League of Legends IP, exploring various alternate universes and weird ideas for what you might be able to do with the characters. I support this with every fiber of my being. I have been on Riot's case for a very long time to create more comics set in their universes, to explore their characters more, and they're doing it. But they're doing it kind of poorly. Now, I have done an entire video complaining about the way in which these comics are published and the way they're publicized. Essentially, I don't think Riot does a good enough job at all of calling attention to the fact that these comics exist, and I don't think the way that they're publishing them, that is, the format in which you're reading them, is very conducive to building a community around them. Having spent an entire video complaining about them, I decided to put some effort where my mouth is and actually use whatever platform I have to give these comics some exposure myself. Give them, make people look at them. Make people at least aware that they exist, because a lot of people, at least according to the comments I've gotten so far, didn't even know that these comics were a thing, which I think is a pity. So, Punches and Plants, a Piltover Police story is your classic buddy cop comedy. Vi is the grizzled veteran who doesn't need a dang assistant, damn it, doesn't want a partner. I roll on my own, I'm a loner, a rebel. And Zyra as the newly academy-trained rookie who is brought in to be assigned to Vi as her partner, very much against her will. And it has the same challenge that the previous comics we've looked at do. It's a short comic with a lot to say. If you remember Crystal Quest from yesterday, it tried to tell a full, or at least half of a fantasy narrative in the span of just 14 pages, and some of the pages kind of suffered for it, in the sense that way too much stuff had to be stuffed in there in order to make everything fit. And Olaf versus Everything, which is a comic predicated on having Olaf fight as many different champions and things in the League of Legends universe as possible, also had the problem where, because it had such a limited run of pages, it couldn't really dedicate very much time to each fight, and each fight ended up feeling just a little bit underexplored as a result. Piltover Police Story, on the other hand, actually does a really good job of this. It paces itself really, really well. It manages to bring out the complete narrative that it wants to tell, paced across 12 pages, and it hits all the beats it needs to hit. It hits all the plot points it needs to hit. It has a little diversionary arc in the middle of the story that gets resolved, and then we go back to searching for the real bad guy, and then we fight the bad guy, and then the end. Like, it's just very well paced. The first few pages are dedicated to setting up the story, that you have Vi, who doesn't want a partner. Zyra gets assigned as a partner anyway. Zyra turns out to be kind of a bit of a goof and not really good at working with Vi, but they overcome their differences and then chase a red herring that doesn't lead anywhere, just like you do in most crime stories. Little bit of ominous setup for the actual villain behind the scenes. He's revealed. We have the climactic battle. Cool girls don't look at explosion. Boom. Story over. I want to emphasize that is really frickin' hard. When you have this much story to tell, getting all that squeezed into 12 pages and making it not feel like it's either overstuffed or too shallow, that's a really hard balancing act. And for my money, at least, I think Risu manages it brilliantly. Which leads us on to talking about the art. Now, the mileage of any art style will vary. Some people like any kind of comic, some people don't. It's very much up to the individual. For my personal preference, I think the art is fine in this comic. I think it works for the purposes for which it is intended. I think it is very well done in the moments where it needs to be very well done, and I think it has some weaknesses. Now, here's why I feel a little bit awkward, because as it so happens, I follow Risu on Twitter, and she follows me, and we have chatted a little bit. So, you know, going into a heavy criticism of her art style in a video feels mean. So I'm feeling a little awkward about this, but I have some criticisms. the art is sometimes kind of stiff. If you take a look at, for instance, Volibear in the background here, he has this pose that's supposed to mean he's running, I think, but it's not. Is he going down on his knee? Is he coming towards the viewer? Where is Ziggs in the space of, like, in the depth of this room? Where exactly is he located? How big is he relative to the other characters? Why is Lucian so large and Quinn so small? And it's little... There are multiple points in the comic where it feels like the artist isn't super experienced with action scenes, where it like the perspective here feels a little bit off. This chase scene here, the relative sizes of the characters and the ways in which they're placed in front of and behind each other don't really give the sense of depth that you need for a perspective like that. And there's all kinds of little nitpicks where the action scenes in this comic, I have to say, for me, they don't quite work. Mostly, though, I don't think it matters that much, because the focus of this comic isn't the action. It's not a Dragon Ball manga. It's a character piece, and the character pieces work perfectly. There's only really one point in the comic where I feel like the art style can't quite live up to what the plot and the composition wants it to do, and that is here. In the climactic final battle between the Piltover Police Department and the evil bot lane mafia gang, like, this is supposed to be sort of the crowning moment of awesome, where the forces square off against each other in an epic battle for the future of the city. And it communicates that this is what's supposed to be happening, but the art style just can't quite, like, this sideways perspective, and the characters not quite sizing up against each other, and this is the only point in the comic where I feel like the action scenes not being the visual highlight kind of hurts the action, because this was the one moment where it was supposed to matter. But conversely, when we're dealing with character moments, that's when I think the art style really shines. Like, for instance, here, when we're taking a look at the various members of the Piltover police office, like, this is just good. Look at this. Look at the expressiveness. Look at the fun. It's just the fun and the joy that this communicates. It's just very good. And when Syra and Vi are just given space to, like, interact with each other, and when characters are just interacting with each other, playing off each other with expressions and with dialogue, that's when this is a really strong comic, I feel. There's one particular moment, like, for instance, here, like, this moment between Vi and Caitlyn is really well observed. Vi with, you know, the jacket half off and kind of the scornful expression and arms overcrossed, and she's leaning, whereas Caitlyn is utterly proper and stiff, and her entire body posture is so well observed. And this is true indeed in this panel as well. Like, when it comes to stuff like expression and body, this panel right here, for instance, is really quite good. That's when I think Risu is really, really good at just making character expressions work, making them sell. And, my favorite panel in the whole comic is this one. Okay, so at this point in the story, and I'm gonna spoil it for you, Zyra and Vi think that Malcolm Graves is the evil big bad because the big bad is called MG. Makes sense. And they follow him to this secret location behind Tom's Buffet, where he enters a room called ARAM. What's ARAM? Must be the name of their secret hideout. Turns out it's the Anger and Revenge Addicts Management class. And it turns out that Graves, in an effort to cope with his anger at Twisted Fate, crochets tiny Twisted Fates with nooses around their neck. And I don't know. I'm sure your mileage may vary. Maybe you don't think that joke is so funny, but I do. There's something about how happy and sincere he looks while he's holding an effigy of a man being hanged that he has crocheted himself as a way to cope with his anger. That's just so fucking funny to me. I honestly don't know why it's so like, there's something about the way the art style really sells this that just, it cracks me the fuck up. And I'm sure it's not nearly as funny to other people, but just there's something about, in terms of a character observation, like, if we're taking this image of Graves as being a law enforcement officer rather than an outlaw. Like his basic concept is the outlaw, and we take that and we transplant it into a sort of quasi-modern real-world police aesthetic. What would be the kind of thing a man like Graves would do in order to deal with the fact that he wants to fucking kill Twisted Fate? And going to an anger and revenge addicts management class ARAM, where he's in therapy with Varys and Sejuani and Tryndamere, trying to get over his anger issues by crocheting. Like, this feels like such a Brooklyn Nine-Nine thing. That's the level. This feels like a Brooklyn Nine-Nine thing, where it's like, yeah, he's dealing with his anger, but that's not necessarily. That's so dark. Like, he's hanged. That is so dark and yet so funny. Anyway, that's part of why I really do like this comic. Like I said, I have my reservations about the action, but when it comes to like those little character moments that matter, like this too, for instance, Jinx here is disguising herself as Queen Ash in order to steal a holy relic from, Ezreal of all people. And there's a wonderful little bit of cohesion here where Jinx in her base skin has blue hair. So she disguises herself as a character who has blue hair. And I don't even know if that's intentional. I don't even know if that's supposed to mean anything, but to me, that's just a wonderful little bit of visual cohesion where the base skin of Jinx is kind of represented alongside the reveal of her Mafia form. Like, something about that just really tickles my artist brain. That's a really clever little visual nod. And I also just kind of love the idea that Jinx manages to impersonate royalty by convincing Ash to go to a rave. That's funny. Like, that's just a good joke. Like, that's a good little conceit in order to make a funny story. So yeah, I think I've pretty much exhausted what I have to say. The last thing I'll comment on for Punches and Plants is this panel right here. This is the end of the story. This is the panel that's really supposed to sell it. And Risu makes the clever decision to go with cool girls don't look at explosions. And what an explosion it is, though. Like, look at that. Look at just... I have my reservations about the art style in other places, but Risu knows how to work with color. It looks fiery, it looks hot, it looks big, it looks powerful, it looks like a proper explosion. And it's really well drawn. And I really like it. And that's just, it's a great panel to end on. It's really nicely done. And I just wanted to remark on that at the end. Honestly, Punches and Plants is a comic. There's not that much you can really say about it because it knows exactly what it is, and it executes on that concept quite well. I would very much, like all of the other community comics, I would very much like to see more. I would like to see a second season or like a second story arc. I would like to see Riot tell these artists, okay, we're going to commission you for 2 or 3 more runs of this story. So instead of having to shove everything into one 12-page run, let's write a story that we can take some more time to explore over the course of 36 pages or something like that. Because again, especially for something like a Piltover Police story, that would give much more space to those character moments, to those little jokes, to those and all the little background gags, like all this stuff. Like look at this panel right here, for example. It's just a chase sequence between Vi and Evelyn and Twitch, but there's some stuff going on in the background that's just lovely. Not laugh out loud funny like that panel at the ARAM, support group, but Gangplank here in the background spilling oranges on the road. Earth Nami wearing the Earth onesie, having gone shopping at a onesies store, is just a clever little observation. And Banana Soraka selling bananas with sriracha sauce to Wukong, who's like an hour full of bananas and one's just stuffed in his mouth. That's all of that stuff is just lovely little background detail, and it makes the world feel like more than just these characters are running around and doing shit. It makes the world feel like there is a world beyond what's going on in the action, especially this rave with DJ Sona. Like that's also something, like, explore that a little bit more. Like, have a longer form police story where they go around and they question suspects and they gather leads, where they go to these locations and hang out with these people, and we get to see more sort of character comedy going on there. I would love to see another season of it. And that's really my primary criticism of all of the comics so far, has been they try to do perhaps too much with too little. Punches and Plants does the very best at this. It manages the best to condense its narrative into this 12-page run, but nonetheless it still feels condensed. Like, it still feels like there's a whole lot of stuff that could be explored more if the artist had more room to work with. Anyway, if you have any comments, any suggestions for other stuff I should take a look at once I'm done taking a look at every single Community comic, because I, committed to doing this, then you should leave it down in the comments down below, along with any suggestions, any thoughts you might have. Like, ask me questions. You can also do that down there. You can leave a like if you're so inclined. You can leave a dislike if you don't like this video. I believe that's what the button is for. And tomorrow, we're going to be taking a look at Academy Adventures, and pretty soon we're going to be done. My name has been TB Skine. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.